Well, it seems I'm back for yet another devlog. This one came pretty quickly after the last one, and the next one will probably be a little while, and I'm going to explain why. I've added a couple new features, really three, but one of them is very minor, and that one was pretty easy, which is I've made the system for detecting the eye interactables, the things that use an interface that allow me to interact with them, require a little less precision. I do know that a complaint a lot of gamers have about some games is when they want you to be pixel perfect. So the way I fixed this was, before I simply used a raycast. A range of 2 meters, should be something pretty close, but if it's not completely realistic, that's okay. What I do now is first I use a raycast, just like before. So if you really do have something aimed directly, you're aiming directly at, it will always pick that first. Then, if and only if it doesn't find something, it will then use a relatively narrow sphere cast. Now that's similar to a ray cast, but it has a radius around it. Sort of like shooting a ball into the screen instead of just a line. And that way, if something is just slightly off to the side, it will pick it up. Now I did the ray cast first and kept the sphere cast relatively narrow, only about a tenth of a whirl unit or 10 centimeters, because I don't want it to be too wide. I have seen another game, there was a classic game, Thief 3 or Thief Deadly Shadows, had this problem where a lot of times when you try to pick something up, you'd end up picking up something off to the side rather than what you were actually pointing at. And what I suspect is they were using something like a sphere cast, or maybe its cousin, the box cast, to make it less pixel perfect, but then it picked things up off to the side. So I made a point to use the raycast first and then sphere cast only if the raycast finds nothing, and to keep the sphere cast a little bit narrower. That way I avoid the problem of things seemingly, as some people would say, overly pixel perfect, but also it should not pick up random things that are, way off to the side that are clearly not what you're aiming at. That was fairly simple, fairly easy. I'd done it before, and it really only requires a few lines of code. Just basically copy what I had with the raycast, put it into a sphere cast, and have a conditional to make sure that it only does that if the raycast failed. That leads on to the other two developments, which caused me a little bit more trouble. You might notice, if you look down to the lower right-hand corner of the screen, that there is now a hotbar. This works more or less as the way you would expect, and that it equips things for you. I will put this over on 6 and skip 1. It does not use things directly from the hotbar, even if it's something that some games might, because I want it to be immersive. When I finally get around to implementing potions, I want it to be where you actually lift the potion to your mouth and drink it to have the potion work. But you can see this working if I just I put the wand in 3, so I push 3, I get that wand, I push it again, it goes away. It equips and unequips your items for you. Do the sword and equip both of those. Do the did I hit it? No. Hit my 6 key, yeah. I was missing the key in the dark. But do that, and now you have your spell equipped. This had a few complications. The way I did it is the hotbar does not contain items or spells. It contains a small class that basically just holds a reference to, and by reference I don't mean in the technical sense, but it just holds data describing a real inventory slot. So it has the type of inventory and the slot number, also whether or not it actually has something in it as a Boolean. And then whenever something gets moved in the inventory, like if I do here, it will update the data down here to keep it correct. If you double click on them, that will also unequip them as a shortcut, so you don't have, people may not want to have something always equipped. They may not want to simply replace it. They may say, I don't want the fireball equipped because I don't want to accidentally cast it in town or something like that. And when you push a number, it basically calls the exact same code as if you double-clicked it in the inventory, which moves it either into or out of the equip slot. The one difference being that it does not apply if you're putting something in a container, such as open this up. In fact, it is smart enough that if I take this and put it in the container, it will remove it from the quick slot. Similarly, if I drop something or throw something, if something leaves the inventory, it will automatically remove it. And I was up half the night the day before yesterday, ironing out bugs and corner cases and so on to get that to actually work correctly. Let me get rid of that real quick. I thought, okay, that's good. But now it seems to work the way I want it. So I start on something else. The ability to load and unload new world spaces, which, in other words, to unload and load scenes as well as data related to a particular world. Previously, my previous videos that I did about this, everything was in one scene, but that's not the case anymore. The character, the UI, the event system, they're in one scene, and there's a second scene that's been loaded on top of it, which is the testing arena scene. And that made it pretty easy. I only have to worry about keeping everything set up in one place. I don't have to maintain different, have to synchronize the setup for the player and the UI and so on between different test scenes like this one versus the island. That actually was pretty simple. I got that done pretty quickly. So I thought, well, what will really be easy now that that's set up is I'll have the ability to transition between some. So if you want to go through a loading screen into a dungeon, or if you wanted to, I don't know, sail to a different continent or a different dimension, whatever you might do that require going to a different world space, you could do that the same way. And that's kind of weird. I'll have to find out what's causing that shadow to be like that. But anyway, that I thought would be pretty simple. I'll just come up with a couple objects, maybe an interactable one that you can click on, maybe another one that you can walk into, and it will load the new scene. And by the way, when it starts, it has a world space, which is a scriptable object, and it loads the scene that it contains, and it has some other data like where the water level is. But when I started doing the ability to transition between scenes, and I just brought in these teleporters from my previous game, my first Unity project, Caverns of Evil, for testing purposes, well, I did not land where I expected to land. I landed pretty close in the same vicinity. I could see it, but I was like probably 20, 30 feet away. And that didn't do. What I didn't realize was that apparently Unity scenes do not all share the same origin, the same 0, 0, 0 coordinate. Everything is in a scene has its coordinates relative to the scene, but different scene 0, 0, 0 for one scene may not be the same as 0, 0, 0 for another scene. And loading a scene 2 different times, 0, 0, 0 might not be the same place both times. So that was actually throwing things off. So I changed my approach. And so what I did was I took the system and just completely threw out the whole thing about putting in coordinates. Instead, I do everything through a singleton game manager and a static class, and there's a static dictionary that links teleporters, such as this one, to destinations, such as this one. And these teleporters could be doors you go through, or walk through darkness into a cave or whatever. I'm using teleporters for now, for testing. It would have a spot labeled above it, technically an empty for those of you who may have done anything with Unity, but it has a spot that is labeled 2 as a teleport marker that has an ID. They are put into the dictionary with their ID. Whenever they're loaded with the scene, they add themselves to the dictionary. They remove themselves whenever they get disabled, or including when the scene is destroyed. And instead of sending you to a location, it will, when you go through the teleporter on arrive in the other world, which that has to be juggled through some other static classes because this scene is being destroyed, it will look up the ID, the string ID that was stored with this, and teleport you to there. So if you go through here, and it'll pause for a minute. When I'm done, there would be a loading screen here, but this is still in development. So right now, you're basically just seeing the world, but because it loaded a new world space that says the water table is higher, it now shows us underwater. And there we go. And I am right on top of this, and it's a lovely night. So that works. Though there is another problem. And this, by the way, is something that took me all night to figure out, because no one told me that. This was an issue that scenes did not all share the same origin. So I Googled and got things that didn't fit or didn't make sense, and I Googled other things, and eventually I found the correct answer. And then I did that. But that took me not up half the night, but literally up all night, almost till sunrise. Which is why I'm now exhausted and need a break before I do more. And there's still another problem. As you noticed, we landed right on the telepad when I came through. We are also running this in the editor. When I compile it to an independent game and run it outside the editor, for some reason, we don't land there, but here. A lot better than before. I would have landed about here. But, it loses its precision, and I don't know why that is. But it's not the first time I've seen things behave differently in a standalone game than in the editor. But that's what I've been working on. It's actually had me very stressed out for a couple nights in a row, and now I'm exhausted. I've lost a lot of sleep, so I will definitely be taking a break before I do any more. And maybe I'll just head back to the test arena. Nah, I don't need to bore you while I walk up the hill to a castle I've already showed and probably shouldn't have. But yeah, it's been a struggle, and I'm worn out, and so I have this new devlog pretty soon after the last one, but it might be a week or two. Probably more like 2 before I do another one, because I'll at least take a few days off. Have a great day, and I'll be hopefully doing another one of these soon. And by soon, I don't mean too soon.